Views and opinions expressed may not reflect those of the Allen County Public Library, Access Fort Wayne, and or any other supporting groups. If you are interested in producing your own programs for Access Fort Wayne, you can contact us at 260-421-1250.
Welcome to Countyline. Hello again, everyone. I'm Mike Green, Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office, and welcome to Countyline, the program that features news and information about county government. Well, from time to time on Countyline, we've tried to take you to some of the different departments and offices in county government to explain a little bit about their function. And for this edition of Countyline, we decided to take you into my office, which is the Public Information Office, and explain some of the functions that go on here. You probably think of Public Information Office as putting out news releases, as well as coordinating news conferences, even producing this fine television program you're watching. But one of the main functions of this office is to help ensure that county government is in compliance with Indiana's Access to Public Records Act. That was originally created by the Indiana General Assembly in 1983 and is designed to give you, the citizen, broad access to public records here in county government and throughout the state. That way you know more about what's happening in your government, also gives you a chance to participate more fully in government. Now, thanks to the help of the Indiana Public Access Counselors, some materials they furnished, we're going to touch on some of the finer points of the APRA law so that you know more about how you can go about accessing public records, along with our Allen County Public Records Policy, which works in concert with the state law. Let's begin by defining a little bit about what a public record is. Now, lots of pieces of paper probably is what you're thinking, but public records mean more than just simple documents on pieces of paper. A public record under the Indiana Code means any writing, paper, report, study, map, photograph, book, card, tape recording, or any other material that's created, received, retained, maintained, or filed by or with a public agency, and which is generated on paper, paper substitutes, photographic media, chemically based media, magnetic or machine readable media, electronically stored data, or any other material, regardless of form or characteristics. There are three categories of public records covered under the APRA law in Indiana. Most records fall under the category of disclosable. In other words, you have a right to access and review those records. Some by law are confidential. You cannot have access to those records. And the third category of records are those that are disclosable at the discretion of the public agency. We'll talk about those last two categories a little more depth a little later on. So, what is your right as far as looking at and making copies of public records? Well, under the Indiana Access to Public Records Act, any person may inspect or copy public records of any public agency during the regular business hours of the agency, unless there's a provision made in another part of this chapter relating back again to confidential and disclosable at the discretion of the agency. And any person doesn't necessarily mean just an individual. We could be talking about corporations or companies, partnerships, associations, even other governmental agencies can inspect and copy public records. Now, a request for inspection or copying must identify with reasonable particularity the record being requested. In other words, an agency should be able to discern and find the records that you're asking for in a reasonable fashion. Also, the request must be at the discretion of the agency in writing on or in a form provided by the agency. In Allen County, we have such a form that's optional, or you can send a regular letter. But we do require in Allen County that you do file a written request for access to public records. We cannot, under the law, deny you access to a record simply because the person making the request refuses to state the purpose of the request unless a condition is required by another applicable statute. And the public agency can either provide the requested copies to the person making the request, or we can allow you to make the copies on our equipment, or if you have equipment that you can bring in to make a copy, or even say take a photograph on your cell phone, you can do that as well. A couple of other notes. There are copying fees that apply. Under state law, a county's fiscal agency can determine the cost of making copies. In the case here in Allen County, our county council sets the rate at 10 cents per standard size piece of paper. Another thing to remember, if a public record has both information which cannot be disclosed and can be disclosed, under the state law, the agency has to provide you the record with that non-disclosable information redacted or separated. That's when you may see, for example, a black bar across a particular piece of information on a document. You still have access to the document, just not that particular information. And the agency must state for you why that information is being redacted, and they have to state the specific statute that's involved. So you filed your request to take a look at records. What happens next? Well, the time frames for responding to APRA requests depend on the manner in which an agency gets the request. If you come to our office in person with a form or letter asking to see public records or documents, then we have 24 business hours to respond. As an example, if you came into our office on a Friday at 2 p.m., then we would have until the following Monday at 2 p.m. to respond. If the office were to be closed for Monday for a holiday, then the time frame kicks over to Tuesday at 2 p.m., 24 business hours. If the request comes to us by mail, email, or fax, then a public agency has 7 calendar days from the date the agency receives the request to respond. Going back to our example, if we receive a request on a Friday, then we have until the following Friday to respond. Weekends don't matter, holidays don't matter. 7 calendar days to respond if the request comes to us by mail, email, or fax. And it's important to also note that production of the documents is not required as part of the response in those time frames. However, the law says those documents that are disclosable need to be provided to you within a reasonable time. Let's go back and talk a little bit about confidential public records, those that cannot be disclosed to you under the law. There are certain state statutes or federal law that make certain records confidential. One example is IC 4694. That has to do with the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Under that part of the law, any complaint filed with that division must be kept confidential. Social Security numbers contained in public records are not for anyone else's eyes. You've probably heard of the term HIPAA if you've been to the doctor or hospital. That has to do with medical information of patients. That information is confidential unless the patient gives written consent. Trade secret information for businesses and corporations cannot be disclosed. Certain foreclosure information is confidential. And grade transcripts, license exam scores, and licensure process also are considered confidential public records under the APRA law. The other category we talked about, exceptions to disclosure. Now let's talk about the third category, exceptions to disclosure, or discretionarily disclosable public records covered under the APRA law. Under that category, public agencies can exercise discretion as to whether to withhold those records from disclosure. But if the public agency does so, they must exercise the discretion uniformly. In other words, they cannot pick and choose circumstances under which they will allow that information to be disclosed or to be kept from disclosure. Here are a few examples of discretionary categories. The investigatory records of law enforcement agencies, except as provided under state law, may or may not be disclosed. the work product of an attorney who represents, pursuant to state employment or an appointment by a public agency, the state, or an individual. Records that are intra-agency or interagency advisory or deliberative material. Personnel files of public employees and files of applicants for public employment are discretionary in terms of disclosing, but there is certain information that has to be provided upon request, such things as an employee's compensation, the business telephone number, the date they were first hired, and the date of their last employment with government. Those kinds of things have to be released to the public. And a record or a part of a record, public disclosure of which would have a reasonable likelihood of threatening public safety by exposing a vulnerability to terrorist attack. Here are some common misconceptions of the APRA law that we could clear up for you. First of all, there's a misconception that the public agency has to answer questions under APRA. What the agency is worried about when a request is filed is whether they have records or documents in their possession that need to be disclosed based on what you're asking for. We can't always answer questions as part of an APRA response. A public agency has to keep public records forever, so it's not appropriate to respond the record no longer exists. State law sets up certain time frames and guidelines for keeping public records. Some have to be destroyed after a certain amount of time. So it could be a situation where a record actually no longer exists because it was allowed to be destroyed under state law. There's also a misconception that a public agency has to handle public record requests before handling other matters of the public agency. Now here in Allen County, we try to respond as quickly as possible, and we try to get you the documents or records you've asked for as quickly as possible. But obviously, other work has to take place within certain departments and offices. So that has to be kept in mind after you file the request. And there's also a misconception that a public agency has to keep public records in a format that's convenient for you. Certainly with the increase in technology and the ability to store documents in electronic format, that's made it easier to meet some of the requests for records or documents. However, there's still a lot of paper, especially from years and years ago. So just because you've asked for a record in, say, an electronic format or file doesn't mean that you'll be able to get it that way. But you will still be able to review the record or document if it's disclosable and if we have it here in county government. So if you feel that an agency has not complied properly with your request for access to public records, what can you do? Well, first you can file a complaint with Indiana's Public Access Counselor in Indianapolis. Their job is to review any complaints and to offer opinions as to whether an agency has failed to comply with the law or has complied with it. There's also the opportunity to take court action seeking an order to produce the records and pay any attorney's fees that may result from taking the court action. And just recently, the Indiana General Assembly passed a law that if a public agency or a public official knowingly or intentionally withholds public records, that person can be fined. So that, in a nutshell, is the Indiana Access to Public Records Act. Now, if you need more information about Allen County's public records policy or the APRA law itself, go to our website, www.allencounty.us. Look on the right-hand side for Public Records Request. When you click on that button, it will take you to a page that has a PDF file of our public records policy, also has contact information, and a direct link to the Indiana Public Access Counselor's website. There you can get all the information you need about APRA, and that way you can ask for a chance to review public records and documents the county government has so that you can be more informed about what's happening in county government and participate in the governmental process itself. Well, after taking a year off, it's once again election season in the state of Indiana and here in Allen County. And to find out more about the process for this year, both in the primary and general election, we're joined by Beth Glugg, who is the director of the Allen County Election Board. Beth, it's good to have you again. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me.
And we should point out that you are in New Digs yet again.
That's right. This is our third and final move over the last several years, but we are again located in the Rousseau building, which was the city-county building. We are now in the southwest corner of that building, which is on the opposite side of the building than we were before.
And if folks are somewhat familiar with what the Rousseau Center setup was before, you're in the area that the city clerk used to occupy.
That is correct. That is correct.
So if you come through the south entrance doors, they hang a left, and that's where they're going to find you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you might be able to hear in the background some noise going on, and that's because voter registration, which is not a part of the election board, but obviously you have a lot of similar interests.
Right.
They are going to be eventually locating in this building. They are still in the former Highway and Building Department building at Superior and Calhoun.
Right, right. So we hope by the summer, after the primary election, they'll be joining us over here and we'll all be one family again.
But as we say, you've got a lot of working together sort of on things election-wise. So
that's right, that's right.
So
we can't do what we do without them and vice versa.
Right, so if you have any question about voter registration, you will need to go to their office, which will still be at Superior and Calhoun. But as far as the election is concerned, you would come here to the Rousseau Center. And this is also where you're going to be doing the early voting process.
Right, our early voting, which will start on April 8th this year, which is actually a day after voter registration ends. It used to be that we would start early voting on the same day as the last day of voter registration. The law has changed on that, so we're going to be starting on Tuesday, April the 8th, and we'll be located in the lobby of the Rousseau Center for early voting.
And it'll be hard to miss when you walk in the door. You'll see plenty of it.
Right.
Early voting has become quite popular here in Allen County, I know from previous elections.
Right, right. Well, in 2012, of course, the presidential election is going to bring out more people, but we had over 20,000 people who voted early. So we expect it to continue to pick up steam. 2014
will not be obviously a presidential election,
right.
And there are very few statewide races on the ballot. In fact, you won't see you won't see any of those until the November general election, because those candidates are nominated at their respective party conventions.
Correct.
But you do have a lot of races that are going to show up in the primaries in May. A lot of them county local races as well as township races.
That's right. The county auditor, the assessor, the recorder, also the county clerk, the sheriff, the prosecutor, all of those local county offices are going to be on the ballot, as well as a lot of township offices. There are a few state offices, and we also will have the U.S. rep on the federal level. Right. That will be selected for the parties, and then state representatives and state senators. Those will all be part of the primary election as well.
And because of the local races, and because you also have, you mentioned the state senator races, there's one in particular, I believe it's District 15, mm-hmm. where the incumbent Tom Weiss has decided to retire, not to seek re-election, and that's generated a lot of interest locally for that seat.
Right.
Because of that, do you think we're going to see a little bit better turnout than, say, 4 years ago, comparing apples to apples in terms of an election?
Well, certainly the ballot determines what the turnout is, and I think if those candidates continue to generate a lot of interest in those races, I think we will see a higher turnout.
Okay. Now, one thing we were talking about before the interview that you really wanted to stress is that you've had a lot of changes in polling locations.
Right.
Explain a little bit about why that takes place.
Well, over the course of years, and especially after a presidential election, we have a lot of voting locations that have worked with us for a long time, but want to take some time off from being a voting location, and they may pull out. And so when someone pulls out, then we have to try to find a replacement. We end up sending people to places that aren't exactly the closest to them. So in last year, what we tried to do is take all of our polling locations and all of our precincts and try to reorganize them so that people would be going to locations that are as close to them as possible.
And familiar to folks.
And familiar, right. So we did a lot of changes, and probably about half of the precincts have been reassigned to new locations. So we want to stress this year that everybody be election ready. Check their registration. If they've moved or changed their name, update their registration, and then check and double check where their polling location is going to be, because it's very possible it may have changed.
If you plan to vote on
Right.
that Tuesday primary day.
Right.
And a great source for that is your website, which can be found on the allencounty.us homepage. But if you go to the election board website, you've got just a trove of information on it.
Yeah, we really like to make all of our information as available as possible as we can on the website. So we really promote that website as a good source of information.
And you can not only find out where your polling location is, but through an interactive map that you have there, you can find out who you'll be voting on. You can just about see what the ballot's going to look like when you show up.
Exactly, right. We put sample ballots out there so everybody can see and plan ahead before they get to the voting location.
There's another option for voting that we haven't talked about, and that's absentee voting. Kind of explain for folks the difference between early voting and absentee voting.
Well, absentee voting is what we call here, anyways, is by mail. And so if you are unable to be at a polling location on election day, or you can't get down to a voting location to vote early here, you can also ask for an application to get a mailed ballot.
Okay. And what other things do voters need to keep in mind before they either head out to vote early, absentee, or show up on primary day?
Well, the main thing is just to be election ready. Make sure you're registered and check where your polling location is. And then the third thing is just decide how you want to vote. Look at your sample ballot, make those determinations ahead of time, and that will make everyone's time in the polling location a little bit less.
Primary day will be especially busy for you folks, and I know it seems like every election, you're always looking for folks to help out at the precincts, poll workers.
Right.
Hey, explain a little bit about that process, and if someone out there is interested in working on election day.
Sure. Both the political parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, are in charge of selecting and referring poll workers to us. So if you're interested in being a poll worker, just contact the party of your choice, either Republican Party headquarters or Democratic Party headquarters, and they'll help you get started.
Okay, and then once you have those folks' names in hand, what are their responsibilities and duties?
Well, we usually have one inspector who is on the Republican side, then we have Democratic and Republican judges and Democratic and Republican clerks. The clerks are basically our customer service agents. They're the ones that people come up to and they sign the poll book with the clerks. Clerks help them get that part get set up.
Right.
The judges handle the voting machines.
Okay.
And get the correct ballot into the voting machine so that people can go ahead and vote. The inspectors are kind of the managers of the whole polling place and keeping track that everything's running on time and well.
And there is some training that the workers will have to get through.
Absolutely. Inspectors are required by law to go through training, and we strongly recommend that the clerks and judges go through training as well.
And you have those days set up so they can come in and
the 2 Saturdays before the election, and we schedule the poll workers for their time.
And of course, we want you to do it as a public service, but you can make a little money.
Yeah,
You do get paid.
Yeah, you do get paid. You do get paid. Generally around $100 for your service.
And primary election day is
Tuesday, May the 6th.
Okay, well, looking forward to it. I know you folks are here in your new location. You'll be
Right.
set up and ready to go.
That's
Beth, we appreciate you joining us. And once again, folks, if you need more information about election day, how to vote, the different ways to vote, information about becoming a poll worker, you can go to allencounty.us. Look under the community tab. You'll find election board. When you click on there, you'll find out just about everything you need to know. And if you don't find out, you can call the election board at
260-449-7329.
or you can drop by their new offices, first floor of the Russo Center. With the start of the new year, there is a new ordinance in Allen County that regulates sanitation standards within hotels and motels in our community. The Allen County Lodging Establishment Ordinance was approved last November by the Allen County Board of Commissioners. It was recommended for approval by the Allen County Board of Health. Mindy Waldron is the administrator with the City County Health Department, and she's here to talk to us a little more about exactly what this ordinance entails and the impact it would have on travelers to our community and on hotel motel facilities here as well. First of all, Mindy, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk a little bit about what brought about the ordinance in the first place.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a culmination of a number of years of discussions about this topic. Many years ago, it came to the forefront. We were starting to see a few complaints, and we gathered the building department, a commissioner, and neighborhood code, and said, hey, are you starting to see an uptick? They were seeing a slight uptick, but it didn't seem like the right time, and that was 5 or 6 years ago. Since that time, though, we did see a very large increase in not only the number of complaints and the number of facilities involved in the complaints, but the severity of the complaints. So we once again convened a larger group, and everyone felt like it was time for some general standards in Allen County with regard to those facilities.
And this is not something that's unusual or unique to Allen County and Fort Wayne.
No. I think we're usually ahead of the game on some of these types of things, but these are not overly detailed regulations. These are what we would consider baseline standards for any resident that would be utilizing those facilities.
And probably important to point out that this has the backing and the input of tourism industry here in Fort Wayne and Allen County, as well as the hotel motel industry for the most part.
Right, and the folks from Visit Fort Wayne, Dan O'Connell and his staff were instrumental in seeing this come to fruition. They actually came to us and were seeing the same complaints we were and said, hey Mindy, I think it is time. Could we at least begin discussions on what regulations are out there? So they brought it to the forefront last year, and then they shared it with their constituents and got buy-in and had a lot of them review it for many months from a content standpoint, so we were able to accommodate them.
So this ordinance is going to deal with both permitting and inspection. Talk a little bit about the inspection portion of it.
Well, and in general, it, like you said, took effect at the beginning of this year, and everyone needs to apply by the end of this month, by January 31st. And then we will have a period of time to phase it in, to go do an initial inspection with the facility and kind of work through the first steps of a new ordinance. And then they will, in general, be inspected one time per year. If there are complaints, we follow up generally within 24 hours on any of the issues that we handle in our department. This will be no different, but the routine inspections should be one time per year, and we won't inspect every room, so it will take, for some of the facilities that do have some issues, it will take some time to get the full facility in compliance.
And who will be doing the inspections?
We took this program and located it within an existing division, which is our Vector Control and Environmental Services Division, the folks that do mosquito complaints, housing complaints. So they're very familiar with the residential inspection program, and they had been doing the complaint-based inspection program on these facilities for many years. So that's where it's located, and several of our staff, they generally do them in twos, will tag team on the inspections.
So a hotel or motel applies for the permit, they undergo kind of the, like you say, the break-in inspection so they can understand exactly what you'll be looking for. And from that point on, inspections on a periodic basis. Are these surprise inspections, or do they get any kind of notice that you're going to be coming out?
No, much like everything we do, we generally want a snapshot of their regular day in the operation. So they're all unannounced, as are complaint inspections, but they're very timely with respect to when the complaint's received. And what's different about this particular program is that they'll receive a score and a grade that would be posted. So that's something new here.
Much like a letter grade or a number, or how does that work?
Exactly right. They'll get both, and how this functions, and we derived it by looking at different scoring mechanisms around the United States, but then customizing it to what works best with the ordinance that we are putting forward. And so there will be a score, which kind of equates to a letter grade, similar to what you're used to, A, B, C, and then there's an F. There is no D. And if someone receives an F, there are different mechanisms to work on that, or if there's closure necessary, then we have provisions in place for that as well.
What type of things will be inspected? What will your staff be looking for?
Very similar to what we look at in any residential situation, things that we would consider sanitation and environmental safety issues, public health issues like walls, floors, ceilings, the infrastructure stuff. Make sure it's clean, free of stains, those types of things. But in this type of an industry, we would also be looking at the bedding, the mattresses, the linens, looking at all of the things within that particular lodging area. making sure lighting is correct, that it's generally clean, that water is provided both hot and cold, clean soap, clean towels, no mold, free of debris and trash, all of those things. And then we would also be looking at the premises of the facility, so ice machines and laundry facilities, as well as the exterior for trash, rubbish, and just general upkeep.
Okay. Once a grade is assigned, what happens then?
And it's a posted grade.
Okay.
So
in
that,
other words, it's going to be there for everybody to see.
yes, it will be at the front desk. That is a requirement that it be in the lobby or at the front desk area where you would check in, so you as a client can make an informed decision. There's also a portion on that grade card that indicates where they can go to our website to get the full inspection information or that type of thing. But there's an option. If you get an A, you're probably satisfied with that and
Sure.
prominently display it. If you get maybe a B or a C or even an F, you're probably going to want to make provisions to raise that grade or at least be able to show your clients that you've come into compliance. And so we have the availability to request an inspection for the upgrade. So if they fix everything and want to call us out, it's for a very small fee. They can have us out for a second, and it would be somewhat of an announced inspection where we'll redo everything. And if they've corrected it all, which is our goal, hopefully that for the client,
Right.
then we'll give them the upgrade. If, however, they haven't corrected it and say the situation's worse, whatever grade is given at that second visit is the grade until that next year.
What kind of penalties could a establishment face if they were to receive an F and then fail to improve their grade?
This is primarily a fine-based ordinance. It is not something where they're very heavy on the permit fees at the front, and it's not based on size of establishment. It was developed more of those that are kind of experiencing the problems and proliferating those issues without complying will receive fines. And so each of the violations carry, whether it's a $25 fine or up, depending on the severity of the issue and how many rooms are affected, they will receive fines for those things. If there is truly non-compliance, when we give correction dates or there's no efforts there, then there can be administrative hearings, closure, permit revocation, whatever is warranted for the facility and their problems.
But that's something that comes further down the
Yes.
line. Like you said, this is not an attempt to be punitive. It's
No.
an attempt to correct a
Yes.
problem.
And by and large, what we've been seeing and what we've been told, and we hope is truly the case, a number of establishments are in good shape now. And so hopefully would receive an A right off the bat.
Sure.
Some might be in the B category because they're marginal and they'll probably work their way up. Many need some assistance, and those will take a little time to do, but that will hopefully raise kind of what we would consider the stock of lodging facilities to promote economic growth here.
Let's say I get a C at my establishment, and I really want to work hard, and I think I've done well enough to get a B, so I call you back out, and I find out maybe it wasn't quite as good as I thought. Do I get the better grade or the worst grade?
Unfortunately,
I
you get
guess.
the true grade at the
Okay.
time, so you would get the worst grade if you had not really done it. We don't foresee that will be much of the case because folks calling us back out hopefully will have addressed those issues. But
Okay.
nonetheless, we did build that in so that we're not having to make judgment calls at the time. The score at the time is what you get.
If you get the best grade, an A, obviously you would like some incentives or
Yes.
bonuses to
Yes.
be involved. What's out there for hotels and motels that hit the top grade?
And that's a good question because one of the things that came to us by way of the lodging industry was, for those of us who do maintain a good facility and we're taking on this regulation and supporting it, what's the incentive to maintain that high grade? And so we did build in a couple. And there's more or less two. One being that if you have an A, when we come to inspect you, but say you have a few violations.
Right.
The violations do carry fines. If you correct them within a very short period of time, which I believe is 10 days or so, then they won't have to pay the fines. The fines are waived for establishments that receive an A. Secondly, the Visit Fort Wayne folks plan to provide some sort of a plaque to kind of denote, and it would be coming from the industry, not necessarily the regulatory, that is something also to display that say this is a very high scoring facility. And then over time, we hope to build in other incentives that we can see that make sense.
So obviously, reaching the A not only helps in terms of avoiding fines, but it is something they can use from a promotional standpoint in a competitive industry
Right.
to point out that this facility has received a good inspection from you folks and that they've achieved the highest level of sanitation.
Right, and it's also important to point out that the industry standards that are in place for some of your higher brand type facilities are much stricter than what's even in our ordinance. So some of them will already exceed it, and that's why I think a lot of them were fairly comfortable with these regulations, and we hope that what it will truly do then is raise up those that do need some assistance from an upkeep standpoint.
Now, are these all lodging establishments in Fort Wayne and Allen County? Hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, those kind of things?
Bed and breakfasts are regulated under another state rule. They always have been. We are the regulators of that. There's only a couple here. So that's a separate rule. And any other food establishments within the hotels are regulated under that rule, swimming pools and those types of things. But there are approximately 60, and it would encompass your motels, your hotels, and your inns.
And again, as you pointed out, and we ought to emphasize this, the vast majority of the hotels and motels are doing a good job in the first place, and no doubt is why they're on board with a lot of what you're doing and what you want to do. It's just a handful that may experience a problem. It may be a continuing problem that needs to be addressed, or it may be something that's just come up that you want to try to address it immediately.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Mandy, thanks a lot for being with us.
Oh,
We
you
appreciate it. Good luck with the ordinance, and we hope it does the trick. We hope it achieves what you're looking to do here in Allen County.
Well, thanks for reporting on it.
And before we leave you on this edition of County Line, we want to show you a new service that's being made available now through the Allen County Public Library, the City of Fort Wayne, and Allen County government. It's called Video on Demand. And it offers you the opportunity to watch some of the programming that we provide on public access television through your computer at your leisure, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anytime you'd like to watch. Now, the easiest way to get there is just to go to our website, which is allencounty.us, and we've called it up on the screen. And if you look over to the right-hand side down at the bottom, where we have our Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook links, there's also a link to Video on Demand. When you click on that, that will bring the service up to you. And as you can see, there are already several different programs that are up and available, videos that you can watch. Fort Wayne City Council, the Allen County Commissioners Meeting, Cable Fund Advisory Board with the city. As I mentioned, also the Allen County Public Library puts up a number of the video offerings that they have on public access television. If you're looking for something specific, say you're wanting just to see some of the county programming that's available, you can click here, go to county, and it will sort the programs for you that the county has put up. If you even want to go deeper into that, you can type a word such as council. If you're looking for county council meetings, and there are some of the county council meetings that are up. Normally, these go up somewhere 48 to 72 hours after the actual meeting has occurred. So again, if you go to allencounty.us, look for the video on demand link that we have. This offers you the opportunity to watch any of these meetings, again, at your leisure, at home. They are the meetings in full, also any other video offerings that we have, such as our County Line programs, will be put up in full. You'll be able to scan across to find specific areas in the meeting that you want to look at, but the meetings in their entirety are there. So if you happen to miss it on the public access television, you will have the opportunity to see it online, on your computer, at home, at work, wherever you are, where you have access to the internet. So once again, go to www.allencounty.us, find the video on demand link, click on that, and check out this new service being provided free of charge to you. That does it for this edition of County Line. I'm Mike Green, the Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office. We hope to see you next time on County Line.